There are times when we come to this place raw and in need of support. At other times, we come with joys we wish to share. Our hymn speaks to some. This past June, when a group gathered to choose our service topics for the coming year, we decided that August is a good time to remember that new people are moving into the area ready to begin a new life. We need to be mindful of what it means to be new in a community. You have certainly been generous, more than generous, in your hospitality to me as I settle into the fellowship. And the reality is, if any group of people knows about hospitality, it's Southerners. We live in a part of the country where graciousness and hospitality is hardwired into the brain. In fact, hospitality is given in so many simple ways that we often discover care offered and received in the simplest of places. I observed an example of gratitude for hospitality in one of my favorite gourmet dining establishment, the Waffle House. And thank you, Cindy. One of my first meals here was at the Waffle House, so I could truly get acclimated. While living in Athens, Georgia, a certain Waffle House was one of the places that I liked to people watch. One day, I was sitting at the counter. It was a crowded morning when a homeless man came in. Now, I had seen this man walking all over town, often talking to himself and always holding his Bible. He came in and very sweetly presented each of his favorite waitresses with a piece of fruit. They knew him. He was a regular and thanked him for his gift. They seemed to understand how important it was for him to be able to give back. And I realized that those two women may have been two of the only people in town who really saw him as a human being. To so many, he was just another of the homeless. But he was honey or darling to them. What a powerful reality that offering represented. Because each of us not only wants to be seen, we need to be seen. We all need to be welcomed with a smile, a greeting, and something warm to drink. Each of us needs to have a community of people who claim us and who welcome us into a deeper acceptance and knowing than the world offers. When we welcome guests into this community, our fellowship is enriched. Yet we often don't know what brings people to our door. Is it the search for community, or a place for religious education, or did friends encourage the visit? Two memories when hospitality welcomed new guests have stayed in my heart over the years. One young man I met probably a decade ago came through the door, was greeted, and sat in the very back corner of the sanctuary. He returned and slowly shared his story with me. He was extremely shy and fearful of people, but he knew that he had to reach out to make some changes in his life. He finally shared with me that his anxiety had been so great that the first Sunday he planned to come to the service, he drove by. 2 more Sundays, he came and stayed in the parking lot. It was the 4th Sunday when he overcame his anxiety and came through the door. His fear almost kept him away. What if he hadn't felt welcomed? Another Sunday, a couple, and this was only 4 years ago, came in and they were welcomed as we try to welcome everyone. It was water communion and their first Sunday in a Unitarian Universalist congregation. They had just returned from Alaska after burying his mother after she was killed by a drunk driver. They felt alone. They had no family and very few friends in the area. They had searched the UUA website to find a congregation near them and had looked at the congregation's website. They needed to be there that Sunday. It was water communion, and they brought water from Alaska. But the tears they shed that day was the water that made that ritual sacred. We often just don't know the deep stories that are brought into our midst. So the concept of hospitality, with its varied meanings, does not adequately articulate the hospitality that we are called to share with newcomers and friends. Does our hospitality focus on what is most important in life? Does our welcoming of the other person signal a need to release old concepts that no longer serve us so that we might break down the walls that separate and divide? The Reverend Dr. A. Powell Davies spoke to this with these words: "The years of all of us are short, our lives precarious. Our days and nights go hurrying on, and there is scarcely time to do the little we might. Yet we find time for bitterness, for petty treason and evasion. What can we do to stretch our hearts enough to lose their littleness? Here we are, all of us, all upon this planet, bound together in a common destiny, living our lives between the briefness, between the daylight and the dark. Kindred in this, each lighted by the same precarious, flickering flame of life. How does it happen that we are not kindred in all things else? How strange and foolish are these walls of separation that divide us. So this morning, let us consider not simply the hospitality we generally think about, but radical hospitality that calls us to break down our separateness, to engage deeply with those we might consider the other, the stranger. When we look at the world religions, we discover a common precept that we need one another. This universal truth can be found in stories from many traditions in which individuals who welcomed a stranger later discovered they were giving nourishment to an angel, a prophet, or a hero. These stories are all reminders that to be a truly compassionate human being, we must move past our fear of those who are different from us to a deep, authentic hospitality. This is both an act of compassion and an act of justice, for it is in hospitality that we come truly to understand we are human beings who are part of one family. Father Daniel Homan and Lottie Gollins-Pratt offered a book entitled Radical Hospitality, Benedict's Way of Love, in which they write, When we speak of hospitality, we are always addressing issues of inclusion and exclusion. Each of us makes choices about who will and who will not be included in our lives. Hospitality has an inescapable moral dimension to it. All of our talk about hospitable openness doesn't mean anything as long as some people continue to be tossed aside. But calling hospitality a moral issue doesn't tell us the whole truth about hospitality either. A moral issue can become bogged down in legalisms, and hospitality is no legalistic ethical issue. It is instead a spiritual practice, a way of becoming more human, a way of understanding yourself. Hospitality is both the answer to modern alienation and injustice and a path to deeper spirituality. So why talk this morning about hospitality when we really are a friendly and welcoming group of people? Well, the reality is that no matter how open we are still growing in the spiritual practice of hospitality. Radical hospitality, like relationships, takes work and practice. It means nudging ourselves to move outside our comfort zone and shifting our understanding of who is us and who is them. Even the definition of the term acknowledges that our interactions with others need to encompass a compassion that emerges from the core of our beliefs about life. Actually, the definition of the word radical reminds us of this, for radical means coming from the root or the core. So radical hospitality calls us to a kind of engagement with one another that comes from our core values, our core beliefs. This is a deeper kind of hospitality that can only be approached from a place of the open heart and the open mind. It comes from a willingness to be changed by the person with whom we are engaged. In this time when there are political, social, class, and ethnic divisions manipulated daily by the media and advertising, it behooves us to be mindful that sometimes our work to offer hospitality is like walking upstream with the flow pushing against us. Yet when we do open our hearts and minds to those who may be very different from us, we find a new understanding of what true community can be. It is that rich, wondrous experience to which Rumi spoke so eloquently. Beyond our ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make sense anymore. The Dutch theologian Henry Nouwen wrote, "Hospitality means primarily the creation of free space where the stranger can enter and become a friend instead of an enemy." Hospitality is not to change people, but to offer them space where change can take place. It is not to bring men and women over to our side, but to offer freedom not disturbed by dividing lines. This kind of hospitality is a deeper vision of who we can be together. I've already seen numerous glimpses of how individuals and groups within this fellowship have chosen to move into a sacred space in which we are shaped and reshaped by each other. I ask us to continue to open this fellowship to welcome those who seek a liberal religious community. Let us offer radical hospitality, knowing that when we go to that field beyond our ideas of right and wrong, we risk being changed by the other person. And as open as we consider our community to be, it will be challenging to release our need to shape this community according to our understanding of Unitarian Universalism. It is being willing to be present with another person, newcomer and old friend alike, with such a deep openness that we are willing to release our opinions and beliefs to be changed. This challenges some of our thoughts about Unitarian Universalist communities and how they function. Let's face it, we often pride ourselves so much on how we discuss and argue points of view, and that we have the freedom to question, that we sometimes think we can say whatever we want or do whatever we want with impunity. Yet that perspective can be dangerous, since it can mean we come at our faith and community from a perspective of competition, thinking my viewpoint and opinion is right and you need to believe it. That is a nerve for all of us, isn't it? There are certainly times when it might be true that we are right, but there are other times when we might consider Rumi's invitation to that deeper engagement. And I want to share that little verse again. Beyond our ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make sense anymore. To do this, we must choose to come at our engagement with one another from a deeper place. It is one that calls us out of what we want others to hear to a place of deep listening. This approach to the shared life in our community must always come from a place of compassion. Before we speak, we need to think, is what I'm going to say true, helpful, inspiring, necessary, kind? And how will what I say enhance the life of this person and this community? This is a challenging way of engaging with each other, for it pushes us to be more intentional about our interactions with one another. It calls us to think first of the other person, to release some of our old ways of being together and our old ways of seeing the world. Each day, we have the choice to decide whether our old ways of seeing each other cause us to react defensively? Are there walls that we have carefully nurtured and built over the years that need to be dismantled so that we do not feel separate and alone? This kind of hospitality that we might offer both newcomer and old friend often takes courage. It's risky to be truly open, to speak our truth, to sometimes be quiet, and sometimes honest about our feelings. We might be changed or hurt or frightened. And in truth, this is the risk that I have chosen to take with you. I choose to open my heart and mind to you, knowing that I will not be the same person next year or 5 years or 10 years from now, however long we have together. And I hope with all my heart that you will not be the same people either. With every death, with every baby who is born into this community, with every new person that enters this fellowship, we can and need to be changed. And what a blessing it is to be transformed by the care, conflict, and compassion that have shared together. Kathleen Norris wrote, "True hospitality is marked by an open response to the dignity of each and every person." Henry Nouwen has described it as receiving the stranger in his own terms and asserts that it can be offered only by those who have found the center of their lives in their own hearts. It reminds me of that common greeting on the Asian continent, Namaste. It is the sacred that is in me, recognizes and honors the sacred within you. This kind of hospitality happens when we commit ourselves to risking who we are for what we yet can be. It is being willing to listen deeply to what is in the heart. I can already see this commitment at UUFC in covenant groups, book and discussion groups, in friendships and shared work. Radical hospitality is about inviting one another to sing the song of life together, knowing that together we find hope and love in the midst of our community. And in that spirit, I invite us to rise in body or spirit to share our closing hymn. Come sing a song with me.